Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Forbes. I'm the California National Party chairman and host of Free the Bear. This is our second episode. I know I told you all last time we'd be talking about the environment, but we're going to switch it up a little bit because literally yesterday from this recording was the State of the Union. This was, again, the big speech by President Biden. It was also him being yelled at by Republican congresspersons. So we figured it'd be kind of a better deal to discuss the legislative branch that Biden just spoke in front of. Now, of course, we're going to go through a little history lesson here. This is probably very redundant, but just in case. The United States has three branches of government. We have the executive, which is the presidency. We have the Supreme Court and the courts, judiciary, and of course, we got the legislative branch. Now, we have part of the legislative branch, two bodies. We have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives. Now, part of the reason why we want to have Cal Exit happen is because one of those bodies, well, basically both of those bodies really, but we'll get into that a little bit later, but one of those bodies is not very representative for Californians. Now, California is a nation state of 40 million. We're bigger economically than Canada. We're bigger population-wise than Canada. But when it comes to the Senate, the United States Senate, we get a whopping 2 votes in that Senate. Wyoming, which is smaller than my hometown, which is smaller than most of the cities in California, also gets 2 votes in that same body. So you can see there's a little bit of a representation issue at work. And right now, what we're going to discuss as part of our California National Party platform, what we can do to try to change that, if anything. And also we're going to talk about why the Senate is problematic. So joining me on this is Bill Skog, our Northern California chapter coordinator. And Bill, why don't you introduce yourself for a second?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it's great to be on Pacifica Radio. I'm not a native Californian, truth be told. I'm an East Coast guy, and my first love has been radio. And this is a legendary radio chain, Pacifica Radio, be it the home of Ralph Nader or Jimmy Dore, what have you. It is a big deal for me to be on this network, and I must acknowledge right away that I am indeed the dumbest person who's ever been on Pacifica Radio. But for those who are listening, I just want you to know that I respect you, and I apologize for my stupidity up front. But yeah, you talking about the Senate, I'm going to try to be radio appropriate. Was it LBJ said, the Senate is where you make chicken salad and the House of Representatives is where you make chicken fertilizer? Or I'll even say, dare I say chicken poop?
Yeah, that was not exactly his language. This was an anecdote that was relayed by George Bush Sr., actually. And yes, that's how they all think of it. The political elite of the United States, they don't take the House too seriously. And the Senate is really where everything kind of happens. If you look through history, for example, the biggest battle for civil rights was never really in the House of Representatives. It was always in the Senate. And part of the reason why was because of the 2 senators per state from the South who didn't want to have to do anything with civil rights. Also, at the same time, too, the Senate rule of the filibuster, where you can basically have quote-unquote unlimited debate, so that if you didn't like one bill that's coming by, and you don't exactly have all the votes to block it in a straight up and down vote, you delay business of the Senate to the point that the rest of the Senate grinds to a halt, and then they decide, well, you know what, we need to focus on something else right now. We can't keep holding up proceedings due to your filibuster. And the filibuster, Bill, this kind of is a pop quiz, and you're not the dumbest person, I don't think. Where in the Constitution does it say that there's a filibuster rule in the Senate?
Ooh, I think that's section 42069, right in between where it says your right to fight for your right to party. And
I would say nice to the reference.
I have my moments. That was one of them.
Yeah, no, there is nothing in the Constitution that talks about this. In fact, most legal scholars would say that this was never intended by the framers. Now, I know
I can say this.
Hmm.
I grew up in rural New Hampshire. So I truly understand the fear of rural places of a policy. We're going to tax rural America and we're not going to tax the city people. I there that is a real fear that rural America has. So I can even accept the
That
electoral college or the Senate. But the fact that two of the three deciding factors are not the popular vote, and the House of Representatives has no real power,
I
it
mean,
is
that's the
ridiculous.
whole, yeah, that's the whole problem in a nutshell. I mean, it was, even if you say that, okay, it was one person, one vote, population, we're all Americans, etc., rural, not. Um, when you have such a system like this that was set up, again, it's giving the ability for populations with differing values to have much more weight than they should. And you're absolutely right. Again, electoral college, Senate, both at the same time basically means that there already is a minority political program dynamic that's actually happening in this country. And when you have major things happening when it comes to world affairs or again internal trade, external trade, etc., when you have all these happen with people who again are coming from very small population centers, who they only have to basically keep in mind these smaller population centers, like again like a Wyoming, North Dakota, etc. Things get skewed. It doesn't really become the real kind of will of the people as we were supposed to know it.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to go even I'm going to go a step further. There's three branches. And by the way, if you want a side note, YouTube AOC trying to explain the three branches of government. Stupidity is not something that is just monopoly of the right. She had problems explaining this too. But if you look, there's the executive branch that has actual power. There's the judicial branch that has power. The legislative branch, be it because of the constant you just struggle, there's no clear majority or just in its function, it has no actual power. The only power that the legislative branch has is in the Senate appointing Supreme Court and judicial nominees.
Which
That
is,
is literally
yeah,
the only power the legislative branch truly has compared to the executive branch and the judicial branch is approving judicial branch people.
right.
And
Because
the
again, the
only
Supreme
power
Court,
of that is
yeah.
in the Senate. I honestly feel maybe Pacifica Radio can do a poll of this. Um, who has more influence in your life? Your local dog catcher or your local House of Representatives member? Because I think in California, it's really the person who's out there day and night protecting you from stray Fidos.
Well, it's just that again, the system is so skewed. I mean, yes, the Senate has the ability to vote on who the president is nominating to put onto the Supreme Court, which is now turned into kind of basically the Supreme Legislature, which again is not very democratic if you look at it that way. Um, I mean, it kind of already is something that's boiled into the DNA, or I guess the framework of the entire country from the get-go, because they really didn't want the House of the People to actually really have too many powers. They wanted basically to have the Senate aristocracy. I mean, the Senate, for the longest time until about into the 20th century, the Senate was originally indirectly elected. It was elected by the legislatures of each state. The legislatures would basically appoint the two senators into the Senate. So they never
Well, and
had this. Sorry?
I was going to say, all political or philosophical things, are perfect except for people. But the idea of a republic was you had the common people who had a branch, you had aristocracy, and then you had an executive who would be the deciding vote factor.
Hmm.
If we could have that, as dysfunctional as America is, I could settle for that and be like, wow, we've had an improvement. where the House of Representatives actually represented me, some, just regular jerk. The Senate represented Elon Musk and all the other important people like Paris Hilton and Weird Al Yankovic, and the executive branch who represented everybody. I could live with that. But the House of Representatives is just the JV Senate at this point. It's where, Congress people try to stand out so they can eventually run for Senate or governor and then become president or host an MSNBC show.
Well, it's kind of like, again, the Roman system, right? It's like you work your way up the ranks through the offices to the final executive office. It doesn't seem much different than that, no. And also,
and you talk about the State of the Union last night. If there was ever an example of, hey, America is doomed, this country is in a lot of trouble, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene last night and her performance. Not only, her outfit was just ridiculous for a State of the Union, and I know that shouldn't matter, but I digress. But
well, but if someone dresses like a Bond villain, you should point it out.
She literally, that would be the way I described it, but her yelling liar, and just the House of Representatives is just a bad improv troupe.
Well, let's go back. Yeah, it is, and it's also, again, very powerless because they can pass things up and down in a normal vote fashion. I mean, the House of Representatives does not have a filibuster, so they don't have to hold out for Joe Manchin or, what's her face from Arizona, Kristen Sinema? Is that how
the one who wears the great? Gosh, I hate to acknowledge this, but I love her style. The boots, the glasses. She seems like she would be a lot of fun at a bar.
But not making decisions, and no, she doesn't.
But she is ruining the world. I'll say that.
Well, yeah, and the Senate itself, because of these weird. The filibuster, which is not constitutional. There's nothing that ever say this was constitutional. Yes, the bodies can set up their rules, but no one made it the system had to have like 60 votes. It was always supposed to be up and down. Again, it was plus one. That's all you needed. The system has been set up that these kind of personalities are kind of outweighed when they should not be. Again, Arizona is much smaller than California. But again, she can make sure that we will not have a $15 minimum wage.
Absolutely.
That's something they push into. And again, none of the Congress people really want to be in the House. Again, that was the reason why LBJ, who started as a House member, made that analogy to George Bush Sr. From the other side of the aisle. Is because, again, there's no real point for the House of Representatives. There's nothing to really, pull politics in any direction with the House. Under the Constitution now, the House can or is supposed to be the one that initiates revenue bills, quote unquote, right? Where basically they are the first ones up to the gate to, taxation, budgeting, etc. They get the first try, basically. But what's silly about that is they make it out like that's some kind of important power, but when you have, political parties in both chambers and they coordinate, and then the final decision is made really in the Senate. Yeah, it's basically like I have this term paper. Here it is. I didn't edit anything. And then my buddy is going to come through, edit it, grade it, push it through. That's done. This is how that system works. It really is not like something where we're able to, believe that the representatives who are supposed to be closer to the people because they're part of districts, they get a first try at it. But so what? It doesn't really matter if their homework's going to be overwritten, redone, pushed away.
I'm just asking you this. If the House of Representatives did not exist in America, would it change your life in any way? Just say we just threw those obligations to the Senate. It wouldn't change your life in any way.
Because of this, the dynamic, again, the power, again, the ratio of power that goes towards the Senate. Yeah, there's no changes. And actually, if you really go to people on the street, right? If you just do pop quizzes, like, remember Jay Leno used to do those like street walk kind of things, just kind of have people go around and ask them random questions.
Jaywalking, yes.
Jaywalking, yeah.
Steve Allen did it in the 50s.
Did you hear about this? Did you see about this? Yeah. I mean, like they do this thing where, or I mean, you could do this thing where you could go out there, you ask a random person, "Hey, who's your congressperson for your district?" A lot of times they don't know. They'll know their senators probably, hopefully, but even
I
then, it's not,
bet you,
but I mean, most of the time they'll not know their congressperson.
I bet you 40% of people don't know their congressperson.
And, I had to kind of, because of these redistricting things that happen all the time, I had to make sure exactly what district, what representative I had. And I don't think some people put in that homework. I'm not trying to say I'm special. I'm seriously not. You know, but anyway, going back to the Senate. Okay, so California has two votes. Wyoming, which is smaller than most of our cities, has two votes. North Dakota, South Dakota, most of the southern states are way smaller than us. Well, okay, so our voice is completely minimized. And yes, okay, we can all do the fun history lesson that this was a plan to make sure that Virginia did not just, take over the entire country back in the 1700s, right? Because of the smaller New England states, they need to have more of a voice. I get why there was a compromise there. But
Yes, this was during colonial times where the modes of transportation were boats.
yes, and Virginia was gigantic compared to the other colonies. So I understand why you would need to have, if you want to have a unified government, yeah, sure, I get it. Um, but again, we live in 2023 now. This is the 21st century. Again, and I don't believe in deification of historical figures or politicians or anything like that. They're people just like us. They came up with what they thought was the best idea at the time. And also, we're talking about people who were slave owners and brutal merchants, and not exactly the types of personalities that we encourage nowadays. But that being all said, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Again, California is huge. We're bigger than Canada. Our economy's much bigger than Canada. Our economy's bigger than, most of Europe, for example. So how do we get more of a voice in political affairs? How would we do that, Bill? I mean, just kind of, again, pop quiz once more. How
You
will we have a
don't.
change?
Well, you don't, because any constitutional change is going to have to make small welfare states. Mind you, all these small states are welfare states for the most part. They depend on California and they get our influence. So it would require a constitutional amendment if you're talking about things like that, where they
That's the
would
only
have
way
to
to have,
cede
yes.
power. So it's never going to happen,
I
is
mean,
your answer. If
yes. I mean,
if
that's
you
just,
are a Californian who wants to have control over your life, it is never going to happen in the United States of America. Now, mind you, when the Constitution was created, California did not exist. Thomas Jefferson thought America should end at the Rockies. Although I disagree, I think that parts of America should have ended at the Appalachian Mountains. But more importantly, like California was never a part of the Constitution or the founding fathers' thoughts. They never thought there was going to be a massive swath of population. They didn't even know California existed. It
they
was
thought it was
not it,
they
it
thought it was an
didn't
island.
exist to them. They thought they would hit India. They thought they were
Yeah,
hitting
I mean
tea,
it's
not
pretty. Again,
California.
they thought it was an island. I mean, again, the name California comes from, I think, some 15th century Spanish novel or something like that. But yeah, they didn't even know that. But the
They
one
did
thing I would just
not.
say though is that the one kind of hint that things should be done differently out here was, I believe, that Thomas Jefferson, because of the Lewis and Clark expedition and stuff like that, um, was thinking that there would arise a Pacific Republic.
Yeah, it was. Oh gosh, and this is why we need Michael Lobes on. I forget the name. There was a
Michael Loeb's
book,
our former chair and also who ran for governor, just in case to fill people in.
26,000 votes, no big deal. Thomas Jefferson had a correspondence with a famous trapper or trapper and trader who explored the Pacific Northwest. And Thomas Jefferson specifically said America should end at the Rockies. But nobody thought that there would be a place west of the Rockies that would be the economic and cultural agricultural hub of this country.
Well,
That was not foreseen. If they had foreseen that, they would have said this should be its own country.
and they're kind of again. I would have to dig up the source, but Jefferson did talk about Pacific Republic. There was already even kind of an inkling of a thought process there. Yeah, I mean, what you just said is very important too. Let's just go back again. This is an agricultural powerhouse. This is again Silicon Valley, Hollywood. I mean, this is again one of the huge economic engines of the entire nation. And this economic engine that is providing so much to the other parts of the nation only gets 2 votes in the Senate. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So you're going to have also, again, because when you move farther out east, and I think you can testify to this as well. Yes, there is a feeling of statehood. Like I'm from Virginia or Kentucky or New Hampshire or, Massachusetts. Yes, there's a feeling of that, but there's also a feeling of regionalism. And when you have these big chunks of regions kind of thinking the same way, we're already outgunned even more so.
Back to what you were saying about the Senate. If you think about the amount of money that is spent just on Senate races compared to the House of Representatives, it shows you which branch is more important.
Yes.
There's
And
House
again,
races that
yeah.
there are House races where there's some districts in California where there's a Democrat who will run unopposed. You will never see that for a senator. There will always be a senatorial candidate. Even if it's an Alabama Democrat or a California Republican, you'll always have a Senate candidate because the Senate matters. There is a reason.
Yeah, and even in our system too. I mean, we have the jungle primary, right? We will have still combativeness even within the Democratic Party to get a Senate seat, There was always going to be someone that would step up to bat to either anti-establishment or pro-establishment or whatever within the Democrats. They'll still battle it out. No one's going to ever give a Senate seat just away.
Absolutely. And, I'm looking and I'm not looking. I'm thinking about California and how our legislative body is sadly very similar to America's. One of the things both you and I really support is proportional representation in the California Senate.
Absolutely.
The idea where you're not voting for a person and you're voting for a party. I have some in mind, but I'm curious about you. I want you to do fan fiction we get California, we get proportional representation. Tell me a scenario where you see a bunch of coalitions working together to make something happen.
Oh, I can easily see it. I mean, again, in our platform, which is online, again, if you go to californianational.party, you can look up our platform directly from there. We do talk about, again, our party list proportional representation system, and easily I could see in some, scenario where, for example, the Greens, the Libertarians, and CMP, and also the Peace and Freedom Party, they make a coalition agreement to basically end the war on drugs.
Not only that, you're going to get some people on the left in the Democratic Party and some moderates Republicans.
Yeah. Also, there is Libertarian Republicans. You're absolutely right. So, I mean, the reason we can easily have coalitions on multiple issues, and we can actually have, again, our party is different from other parties. That goes without saying. We do have different look on a different view on certain things, but we agree more with a broad spectrum of the left in California, which are currently not represented in any way in Sacramento. And if we had this party-less proportional representation system, which is, again, this is not some new-fangled weird idea. I mean, Germany, Israel, again, large parts of Europe have this system where, again, you vote for the party in a party-less platform, and that party, usually one chamber, not both, but that party will, again, have some kind of, at least say 5% of the assembly or whatever. They'll be able to have like a little minor vote, maybe, or even a bigger vote if they take off. But what happens is that with these percentages, they combine and they can actually rule on certain issues. And usually they hand out, or they actually hash out a kind of coalition agreement. Now, people, if you're, looking at the German elections or just fairly recently, they have a coalition government. They have the Social Democrats and the Greens, and I think a couple other parties too. But they basically hatched an agreement of who runs what, who's in charge of what departments, and what the agenda should be. And the voices of people who want to have their smaller party be heard, they really are heard in that system. That is not happening in the American system. And sure as hell, it's never going to happen in the U.S. Senate because of the reasons we already talked about before. You're not going to be able to do a constitutional change. There will never be some kind of convention or amendment put up to vote. We're going to have some other voices than the Democrats and Republicans get into power, or some kind of vote where it makes it at least, more representative of like the actual population at large. For example, more Senate seats for California.
This is a personal note. So if anyone is listening and you work with tombstones, if I pass away, I still have hope that I can lawnmower my brain into the interwebs. But if I pass away, I want on my tombstone it to say, "Hey, libertarians, you have more in common with the Green Party than you do the Republican Party." And when we're talking about proportional representation. Green Party, the California National Party wants to give you more power in the state. Hey, libertarians in California, we are pushing for proportional representation. The California National Party wants to give you more power in California. That's one thing I love about, this movement that we're talking about now. It's not about our party. It's about lifting these third parties and helping breaking this cycle of you want to call it the 1.5 party system that separates us from the people who call it the one party system.
Yes,
but
I would say.
Okay, I'm going to concede something because as a progressive, I feel we should concede this. I am aware there is differences between the Republican and Democratic Party. I know that with the Republican Party, I am getting a hardcore Christian oligarchy. Whereas with the Democratic Party, I'm getting a cancel culture oligarchy. I don't know which one I prefer at this point. I hate both. But just along the lines of proportional representation, hey, green and libertarians and peace and freedom, we need to work together to fight our common enemy. Like, left and right is not the enemy. The enemy is authoritarian government versus a small government. And when I say small government, I'm not talking about, tax breaks for the rich and no social safety nets. I'm talking about money, giving people direct money rather than a means-tested program and things like that. So
I would say we're on the
apologize.
same again. Well, obviously we're on the same page. We're in the same party, but I mean, honestly, again, what you laid out is my thought process. That again, we have more in common with many of the other parties who are outside the political established system, and we have more things to talk about and agree about, and we don't need to get into this kind of weird French warfare between the oligarchs. So, I think that. Again, the reason why we need to have California exit the union is because that's our only chance to have a good system that actually pays attention to the voters. And right now, with the Senate, we're not getting much of a voice. We all know that. Again, we can talk about that ad nauseum. And just as a quick aside, too, again, the House of Representatives in much of the United States is gerrymandered. I mean, these are districts that are worked in a way that would favor the party that rules that state. And that's
All
not
right.
very democratic either, and that doesn't really help out Californians either. And as far as I'm aware, too, I believe there's a case where the Supreme Court is getting ready to eliminate our Citizens Commission. Now, California woke up one day and realized that probably having politicians draw up their districts was probably not the brightest idea. And so we should have
Yeah, California leading the way on that for sure when it comes to gerrymandering. And
yeah,
to reiterate, this is not a left and right issue, gerrymandering. I'll give you a personal note. In 2016, I did not support Bernie Sanders at first, even though his policies were more aligned with mine. I knew that America was doomed and that there was just going to be gridlock. I supported Martin O'Malley because I am a massive fan of The Wire, the TV show. And I wanted the person who was based on the mayor, Tommy Carcetti, to be president. So that was literally the only reason I supported him. But he literally talked about this exact thing. This was one of the major points of his platform um, when it comes to the election process as such. I digress. I apologize.
no, it's okay. And again, The Wire is a fantastic series. Sopranos is better, but I would just say that
Oh,
I know, again, this is a point of digression here, but the whole, again, one of our things that we're trying to promote here is that, yes, when we talk about this stuff, we're not really, this isn't about just us winning. It's about just trying to restore a sense of good governance. Granted, that's probably just a ahistorical idea. You know, there was never a time for clean American good old politics. That was never true. But I believe that idea is still strong, it's still sound, and we need to work towards something like that. And actually, you know, instead of just BSing ourselves to death, actually go towards that city on the hill, so to speak. And again, I think the only way we can do it is within the California independent system. It cannot be under the current system because the current system cannot be reformed. So on that note,
Washington, D.C. is not going to give up power.
yeah,
When,
simple as
when
that.
people talk about the California independence movement, they're like, oh, it's such a pipe dream. It is a far-fetched idea in theory. I get that. What's sad is I feel it is more likely that California becomes independent than it is Washington giving up power back to the states to allow progressive policies to happen. I believe that the end game is clear. The conservatives have won. Oligarchy, Christian nationalism has already won. And we talk about the Senate, we talk about the House of Representatives. The Supreme Court, Donald Trump, by the way, for all his shortcomings, never planned on nominating as many Supreme Court justices as he had because Donald Trump, in actuality, is pro choice. He's a New York City liberal who has some racist traits, but he's pro choice because he has had many women have abortions. He was not expecting to get Brett Kavanaugh, the handmaidens lady. He was not expecting to stack the Supreme Court to forever make America Christian Saudi Arabia. But we're here, guys. If you're listening to it, it's already over. It's all theater at this point. The conservatives have won. If you want to live in a progressive place in North America, you have two options: endure the cold and move to Canada, or come out to the West Coast, make a last stand, and make California or Cascadia, or if you want to add Nevada, because I do love me some Reno and Vegas, the West Coast has to make a stand and become that progressive. Gosh, do I even want to say progressive, or dare I say moderate, or right down the middle? Yeah,
I would
moderate
I
for the
would
rest
just
of the
I would
world.
use another term. I would say modern. It's not really I again, you know, um our platform is modernization, I think, to sum it
But
up. We're trying to join the rest of the developed world and have a stable secular society where again outside voices can be heard There is no true establishment anymore. I think that's all it comes down to. Is just like, are we gonna go backwards to the 18th century, or are we gonna go forward further into the 21st?
The California National Party's platform, compared to the rest of the world, is center compared to like the rest of the industrialized world. The California National Party's platform is center right. People don't realize this in America too. Bernie Sanders, who's the symbol, although there are people in Congress and the Senate who are more to the left than Bernie, but he is considered the far left in America. Bernie Sanders would be a little to the left of Boris Johnson in Europe. America has become so far to the right. We're the furthest right of any industrialized nation. We're further to the right than Russia. Russia has universal health care for their citizens. We don't even have that. We're a country that has far right religious, social, laws like Saudi Arabia or any of those far right, Muslim countries. We have the same thing but Christian. We have Pakistani gun laws. We have Nigeria or Kenya level healthcare policies, third world country policies towards social safety nets. Like, if you're listening to this, you need to accept that America is not even a moderate place in the world. We are a far right nation. And if you want to even be in a land of moderates, you need to come to California, you need to support independence, and you need to sign up yesterday.
And I think that's, again, the way to put it too. It is a place where we're trying to be rational people. We're just like this semi-rational and then also paying attention to the lessons of history. So on that note, I would just say, again, I'm Sean Forbes, the California National Party Chair, joined by Bill Skog, our NorCal Chapter Coordinator. And if you'd like to learn more, or again, follow Bill's good advice to join and sign up with us, come reach us at californianational.party. That's californianational.party. And till next time.
Yeah, and if you like this, check out Red Star Report, which is even more, dare I say, entertaining than our boring little show. We're more of the sausage show. Red Star more of the sizzling bacon. But thank you so much, Hal. Thank you, Forbes. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking to you next week.
All right, take care. Good night, everyone.
Bye.